Hello, everybody. How you doing? This is Brian Smith here from the Youth Stars Foundation. We are at the closing panel for Unity Link Up 2022, put on by the Youth Stars Foundation, supported by RBC and Canadian Heritage. Our final panel discussion is going to be focused on how you as youth workers, parents, teachers, educators, how you could get involved in the community, and we're going to have some strategies and some tips as far as what you can do to improve yourselves and your communities. So we have two guest panelists who will I'll be speaking to today. I have Victor Beausoleil, and I'm going to be speaking to Destiny Gregoire. So I'm going to start off with Victor. Victor, I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself. But tell me, because you're doing so many different things, and I want to thank Victor for coming on, because Victor is out of the country right now, and he's in a very warm place. You know, here we have 32 inches of snow here in Montreal today. It's not very, very conducive, but we can connect virtually. So Victor Beausoleil, please tell the people who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Thank you to you and your team for your remarkable leadership in terms of coordinating this event. My name is Victor Emmanuel Beausoleil. Victor is a Latin word, it means conqueror. Emmanuel is a Hebraic word, it means God is with us. And Beausoleil means beautiful sun in French. My family is from St. Lucia, that was conquered at one point by the French and colonized. And I'm a husband and father of four. My wife and I have four remarkable children: Micaiah, Emmanuel, Camila, and Aquila. And I've been a worker in terms of community economic development and working with young people and underserved, marginalized communities for quite some time, almost 2 decades right now. I'm currently the steward or the executive director of SETSI, which stands for Social Economy Through Social Inclusion. And the premise of our work is engaging communities around all things that we perceive as social innovation. So social finance, social procurement, social enterprise or social economy, social acquisitions, the cooperative movement in Canada, and impact investing. And a lot of my work is predicated on growing up within a household where I saw how peoples of African descent, or St. Lucians in that regard, organize their economic relationships, because my mother was a susu banker. And all communities have forms of organizing economic relationships across the diaspora. There's Kagalis, Hagbas, Susus, partners, hands, box hands. So I watched my mother organize women within her community, and many of them bought their first cars, got the first down payment on their houses through this form of economic activity. And I recognized as a youth worker over 2 decades, and especially the work I was doing with young people coming out of incarceration, that many of the challenges that that folks face, whether it be substance abuse, housing issues, mental well-being challenges, incarceration due to the prison industrial complex, a lot of it had a social economic lens, hence the reason why we formed SETSI. So we do a lot of work in terms of our incubator, our accelerator, weekly webinars, capacity building sessions, convenings, and so on and so forth. So I'm excited to be here. I'm also an author. I've written 14 books, published 12, and I'm just here as a brother, as a husband, father, to support any way that I can. Thank you, brother.
Thank you very much, Victor. Destiny.
Hi, my name is Des Gregoire, and I'm a wait, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can.
I mean, we were talking before, so yeah. So hi, my name is Des Gregoire. I am a community worker based in Montreal. I grew up here with my family. We were from Lachine, I moved to West Island, and now I am living in the city of Montreal. So my community experience started off when I was about 17. So that was joining a peer support group called Montreal Youth in Care Alumni Student Association, which served former youth in care attending post-secondary. So from there, I was a member, and then I moved up to coordinator, and we've been doing projects. I'm also working with VATCHA, which is the youth protection here in Montreal. And so I've been their youth empowerment liaison for about 3 years. And I've been working with youth who are in care, exploring some of their concerns and talking about their experiences, and creating projects to kind of like to make the system better for them through doing projects and all that. Other things that I do is I'm a student at McGill for my second year for a Bachelor in Social Work. And I also am a rapper and an artist. I don't tell a lot of people that. It's usually a surprise, but yeah, and I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
All right, thank you very much, people. This is Brian Smith here, the panel, leading the panel here for the Unity Link Up 2022 event. With all the things that are happening in the world today, a lot of youth have reached out to us and said, you know what, they want to find ways how they could give back to their community, trying to get a better understanding of themselves and the community. Victor, with the work that you're doing, why do you do it? I mean, community work, sometimes, you know, some people say, you know, it's very hard to do. You don't get the respect. I mean, depending on what levels you are, it's tough. You know, sometimes some people who need the help, they don't want it. But why did you decide to, and I would even say, dedicate your life to help youth, and as far as, you know, with social empowerment and social economic development? Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started from a young age, and my why has changed over the years. But my initial why was predicated on growing up in East Toronto in Scarborough. I'm 38 years of age right now, but by the age of, I'd say 17, I'd already lost many of my friends due to gun violence. Now at 38, I've lost 34 of my friends due to gun violence. The most recent being September of last year. My brother, rest in peace, Samuel Abuache, was murdered visiting his mother in September of last year in Jaden Finch. So I lost a lot of my friends due to gun violence at a very young age. And I recognized that there was a lot of challenges in community in terms of poor urban design, in terms of developers gentrifying, or what they entitle revitalizing communities, and a lot of disparities in terms of economic development. And when I look at that movie, Gangs of New York, with Leonardo DiCaprio in it, you see Italian young men in the streets of New York dealing with pervasive poverty. And what did the city actually do? The city actually built infrastructure around these young men. But my peers were labeled thugs. And there was no programs to hug a thug. That was the vernacular in those times. So I really wanted to find ways and means to make sure that young folks coming up behind us had meaningful, sustainable opportunities. Because if you're going to ask a young person to put down malefic and malevolent behavior, or options, you have to replace that with something. So my original work was to try and make things better for those young people coming up behind me in the neighborhoods that we're growing up in. And then obviously, as I got older, my why shifted incrementally towards just my children. My wife and I have 4 children. And some of the challenge, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN, and just some of the global issues that we face right now, we have to think globally, but act locally. And a lot of my work is focused on ensuring that my children actually have a future and their peers have a future, and folks from families that have values that are centered or centric around community development also have a future. So a lot of my work has been predicated on ensuring that folks on the margins and the periphery of our society are centered and have equal access to opportunities and are meaningfully engaged.
Okay. Des, yourself, what was your why as far as giving back and getting involved in the community? Was there a particular moment as growing up where you said, you know, hey, this is what I want to do, or some life experiences?
Yeah. So I'm 23, so I am a youth. I'm still a youth, and I'll probably be a youth until like I die. But so growing up, I was adopted from foster care. So as an Indigenous youth in care, I had like a pretty good childhood. I had 2 parents that loved me and like brothers and siblings. But growing up, it's kind of like when I kind of started having learning about what it means to be Indigenous and what it means to be a youth in care. So even at a young age, I was very, very self-reflective about things that like I was able to do and things that I was not. Something that really struck me was whenever people would kind of say like, oh, you're Indigenous and you're the one who you're making it. You're successful. And when that moment kind of popped in, I was like, okay, and I'm like, that's really good. I was very privileged and all that, but how do I get my peers and how do I get my family to the same amount of like success and knowledge and opportunities that I had?
Yeah. But
So
when somebody says to you, "Oh, you made it," comes to mind for you? Like, somebody, "Oh, you've made it." Like, what comes to mind when somebody says that to you?
what comes to mind is very kind of like talking about representation of Indigenous people. So I feel like there's kind of like a view where Indigenous people, they don't get high school diplomas. They don't have like they aren't seen in bigger positions of power and all that. And for me to be growing in my community work, they were considering me to be a success. Although I don't really see it like that now, but. Mhm.
Okay. Victor, and I'm going to start all of this, with the execution of George Floyd and what came after that, because it seems that after the situation with George Floyd took place, a lot of resources stateside and in Canada started flowing into the Black community, whether it be through guilt, there were a lot of programs that came available, funding that became available, but these things were not there before. Do you think that there's a genuine interest from, I would say, the wider society to make sure that people that look like us, or I'm talking about the Black, Indigenous people of color, that that we're provided with equal access so that we can make full use of our skills to develop a better Canada?
Yeah, I think we have to go a lot further back than George Floyd. My son just finished the book, Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, written in 1776. And that book was the founding documents around a lot of things that we perceive as capitalism to this day.
Okay.
And capitalism and many iterations of capitalism govern most societies across the planet. A lot of folks read that book. They don't read Adam Smith's other book, Moral Sentiments. And in that book, he articulates very clearly that capitalism only works within markets that have morals and are equitable. The reason why I bring that up right now is because George Floyd is the tail end of centuries of oppression by racialized people. The Ma'afa, or the transatlantic slave trade, killed and kidnapped millions of people of African descent. The Berlin Conference in the 1800s was a conference where over 700 delegates came together and carved up Africa like a piece of chocolate cake. The only reason why we're able to communicate virtually right now is because 70% of the world's cobalt comes from the Congo, which is mined by children that look like me, or that look like us when we were children. And the cobalt is in our phones, in our laptops right now. So to this day, capitalism is oppressing peoples of African descent and racialized peoples, Indigenous peoples through stolen land, free labor, and it's very pervasive. George Floyd is one incident that was documented in a time when we have technology. And it's remarkable to see definitely some shifts that have happened, but this has happened before. When Emmett Till was dragged behind a car for whistling at a white woman, his mother said, "Leave my son's casket open." So the news press could take the pictures of the boy's face. So it's not the first time that we've dealt with the fragility of various demographics on the planet and a public outcry and models to work towards greater inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. I believe that the work is still yet to be done because there's a lack of representation on all three levels of government within Canada. There are a lot of challenges in terms of how peoples of African descent organize our own economic relationships amongst ourselves, our institutions, our organizations, our businesses, and the way that we work in solidarity with other equity deserving, but equity seeking, because I hate the word deserving, equity seeking groups. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think the George Floyd incident definitely was a catalyst in the States, but in the same time that happened, a young sister was thrown off a building in Toronto. I won't say her name right now because I believe that case is still going on, but this is nothing new. Peoples of African descent have been treated this way for centuries, but right now it's more obvious and blatant due to technology.
because there was just, it just seemed that there was just, you know, it was a catalyst, and it was, once again, it was seen worldwide, and, you know, whether it be through guilt, we even see now here, as far as within Canada, and this would be passed to you, Des, as far as the, you know, over the summer and the whole unfortunate situation with the Indigenous, with the graves and the discovery of the graves and things like that. And what we see now is that the federal government is injecting a lot of money. Is it for guilt? Is it that they want to see changes made? And the reason why I bring this up is because before there was nothing. Now there's resources, money flowing, and okay, let's make the best use of it. But, you know, do we need to have these catalysts? So I just want to get your whole take on that, Des.
Mm-hmm. So just let me know what catalyst meant.
It just starts. It's like lighting the match.
Oh yeah. There's definitely been like a higher presence of social media to kind of like to kind of push the things that we don't see like right onto our screens. And so kind of like how Victor was saying, like historically, like this has been going on for far much longer. And just so that like and because we have social media, like it's like there's no way to say that you don't see it. Because when people don't see how people are living and how people are changing, it's like they kind of stand in the back. It's like a bystander effect. And so they were like, I don't have to really do anything. But also I'm just so happy that like social media and the news are just giving a platform for Indigenous youth and communities to share their voice and also make a change.
But the platform is there to share their voice. We see things, the good and the bad, but are there things that are taking place? Are there mobilizations that are taking place? Are there things that you have done or would like to see to change the situations that are taking place, that to overcome the challenges faced with the youth that you're working with?
Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of like movements from Indigenous youth. So there's the movements called like I don't know more. There's the missing and murder Indigenous thing where they look into things that have been ignored, such as Indigenous women going missing. The kind of what I am very involved in is kind of like doing grassroots community and also just working to create communities of people who want to make a change. So that's kind of going like, so like, although like there's some big movements, I really try to bring it back to the kids and kind of relate it to their experiences and come up with and have them involved in how they want to make a change.
Okay. Victor, in the Black communities in Canada, so the past couple of years, there's been an initiative started called the Supporting Black Canadian Community Initiatives, where funding has been provided to community organizations across Canada in the Black community. There's been FACE, which is the Federation for African Economic Development, as far as a loan fund for to start up businesses. We have another institution or organization set up called the Black North Initiative. There's the Black Opportunity Fund. There's a lot of different collectives that have been set up to help advance, I would call it, on the economic side and the social side of the Black community. These new initiatives, I mean, yes, the money's there, but is it much more than just throwing money at a challenge? Because, you know, we see, you know, this bank has given that and this organization has given that. Is it much more than money? I mean, what really needs to take place if we're going to have the money, but at the end have some effective change?
Well, I don't think it's just about the money, to be clear, because when you look at all these organizations, if you look at the Black Opportunities Fund, Craig Wellington, the executive director, has been doing work around this for decades. I'm talking about as far back as when Dudley Laws was working at Bad Sea and Charles Roach was around. When you look at FACE, Tiffany Calendar's been doing work for decades. When you look at the Black North Initiative, Sister Dahabo has been doing work for decades. When you look at the Foundation for Black Communities, same thing for Liban and Dr. Joseph Smith, and any of these initiatives. So I wouldn't call them new or nascent initiatives. I think it's the funding of leaders that have galvanized remarkable initiatives to support communities, especially those in the margins, the periphery of the economy. So it's bigger than money. It's about honoring leadership and finding ways and means to resource those that have traditionally been excluded from opportunities. When you look at the Foundations for Black Communities, for example, they put out a report last year called Unfunded. This report identified some staggering numbers as it relates to how much resources go to Black-led organizations within the philanthropic lens in Canada, which is an $85 billion pot of resources, which prompted the government to develop the Black Endowment Fund, a $200 million pot. So the resources are important to fund the work, but the fact remains there's leaders that have been doing this work before there was money, before it was trending, before it was something that was opportunistic. And we have to honor these leaders because they stand on the shoulders of remarkable ancestors that transition. And it's just a passing of the baton to another generation of leaders that are trying to solve pervasive problems as it relates to housing, unemployment, substance abuse, mental illness, the prison industrial complex, the list goes on and on. What I think is important right now is to find ways and means to support these capital intermediaries, folks that are holding capital and deploying capital through grants, funding, and loans, and capacity building intermediaries, primarily because if we don't have knowledge of self, and if we don't have the ability to self-determine the outputs and outcomes of these initiatives, we're in trouble. As well, if we don't have ways and means to self-determine how we go about acquiring resources, then these projects are not going to be sustainable. And most importantly, if we don't find ways and means to have solidarity amongst ourselves and identify other equity-seeking groups that are doing great work and have had successes. I'll give you 3 examples. The Indigenous community across Canada has been resilient, determined, and remarkable in terms of how they organize their economic relationships. There are many Indigenous capital intermediaries. There's over 57 AFIs, Aboriginal financial institutions across the country right now. That's just the Indigenous community doing some remarkable work and remarkable leaders. Then if you look at rural communities, the rural communities a couple decades ago identified they were economic actors. Right now, there's over 267 community futures associations across the country. During COVID, they deployed $500 million through something called the COVID Rapid Relief Fund in loans for rural constituents. And the last group I'll mention is the Francophone community. If you look at Beatrice Allen at Chantier, or Philip Garant at Risk, or Cap Finance, these folks received $20 million from Paul Martin and created $600 million of economic activity. So once again, rural communities understood their economic power, understood how to organize and centralize and mobilize and consolidate their power. Same thing for Francophone leaders, same thing for Indigenous communities. We as Black communities or peoples of African descent have to look to the left, look to the right, and see what's working, what's not working, and find ways and means to link arms with each other and others. Because things aren't getting worse, as one of my colleagues always say, they're actually being uncovered, and we have to hold each other tight and literally continue to lift the veil.
Okay. Something that always comes up, I'm going to pass this over to you, Des. I mean, because you work with youth, there's always an issue that comes up that the youth and the elders or the seniors, right? They're not working together, or there's trust that's not there. And then sometimes there's youth who have great ideas, and I don't know if you've ever come up against this, Des, as a young person, and you're an activist and you want to get involved, but we call them the gatekeepers, right? The gatekeepers are the ones that have the information, have the contacts. They're the ones that maybe deal with the people, the key decision makers. Have you ever come up against that, or is that an issue for you?
For me personally, I don't think it is an issue, just because where I'm working with, it's like we're really, the values that we really have is through lived experience. So kind of like, putting youth as the experts. And also like, in my opinion, it's like the Indigenous community, like they respect all types of all types of ages. So like the youth who are the future, and then we also we learn from the elders because they're the experts, they're the knowledge keepers, they're the ones that pass down things. In the work that I've done so far, everyone's been trying to kind of like support each other and kind of push it for positive change. But no, I do think that like mobilizing the community can be very difficult, especially if it's divided.
Okay. No, something that I want to speak of as a personal experience here in Montreal, that the Black community, as far as with organizing and development, started within the English-speaking communities historically. Over time here in Quebec, there has been a shift where even now too, that the English-speaking Black communities were very small in numbers. And I would say that we've been pushed aside sometimes when these key decisions we're not called to the table. And then also something that has taken place is that a lot of the older, I would call them the elders who were there, have retired, some have passed on. So there was no vacuum there to kind of nobody that was prepared to take over. So now we're kind of like left and there's not that much, we call it leaders, right? There are people who are still doing work, but that openness was never taken care of. Is that something that has taken place, Victor? I don't know, in Toronto, or is that an issue in Toronto?
Yeah, well, intergenerational collaboration is an issue that I think we face globally. One of the greatest challenges I think that we face is eldership is not honored in a lot of ways, which is problematic because youth can walk faster, but elders know the road. I don't think we can only blame young people because a lot of times some folks are older and some folks are elders, and there is a distinction. Just being old does not make you an elder. An elder in the African community is something that is governed by meritocracy. You actually earn the status of elder. It's not just by being an older person. But when I go back to that statement of youth can walk faster, but elders know the road, I think a lot of times some older folks believe that young people are to be seen, but not to be heard. And that's problematic. But as well, young people sometimes believe that they discovered racism. Or they discovered some challenge that actually folks have been struggling with for decades, even a quarter or a half a century. So I believe that we have to find ways and means to build out frameworks of intergenerational collaboration, create opportunities and pathways for mentorship and guidance where young people have the opportunity to engage with elders. And when I say elders, once again, I want to make a distinction. Just because you're older does not mean you're an elder. And really find ways and means to support and amplify the work of young people. Because when you look at our ancestor, Stephen Biko, or any major movement across the planet, it was young people that were the catalysts. Those are the folks that lit the match. But the most successful youth movements were on the shoulders of community stalwarts and elders and ancestors that started that work long before the young people were born. So there has to be a healthy balance between these two demographics.
Okay, but how do we get, and this is for either of you, I mean, how do we get this collective spirit back in our communities? It could be there in certain instances, but we kind of maybe see in a world today where everything is based on the individual. Everybody's looking out for number one, where if we look out more for each other, we work together, like, I guess in the best case scenario, if a youth and an older person is working together, they're sharing information, they're learning from each other, it should be a win-win. Why doesn't that, I mean, I kind of look at it and say, this is like a no-brainer, but then it gets frustrating where we don't work together, nothing gets done, and then the frustration just, the lack of trust, and everybody's looking over their shoulder, and it can become very, very frustrating. I don't know if any of you want to speak to that.
I mean, I would say it just because it's like we're it's like if we're in the same community, then then we're all being affected by like the different social problems. We're still being affected by barriers in the same system. So it's kind of like we only really have each other to push for changes. And it's like I said before, it's like having divisions because of age and experience and all that. But it's kind of like in the end of the day, it's like if you're in a community, it's like you have to work with the people because the people know what's best. And exactly, like you need to be collaborative because any movement that you have, it has to be organized and it has to be all together. But it can definitely be difficult if there's some pushback from some certain community members.
I mean, I think that the trust has to be there amongst everybody. Like, you're living together in a community, developing, sharing. I mean, if you don't have the trust, it's very hard to get things done. Victor, what are some of the things that you would like to see take place in our Canadian communities? Maybe things that maybe they've started, but should be taking place, or maybe things that are not moving as fast as you think that they should be.
Yeah, I love the word community, but I believe that families are important. And the only way that we can move forward some of these pervasive challenges is if two partners come together and raise healthy, emotionally stable children. And these children subsequently are part of a family, and those families connect with other families, which form community.
Right.
And those strong communities come together with other strong communities and form healthy and strong nations. A lot of times, when you look at the concept of community right now, it's filled with young people that are disengaged, once again, because of capitalism or iterations of capitalism, because mommy and daddy or the partners or parents are outside the home trying to pay the mortgage or the rent. The children or young people are in community being governed by youth workers, teachers, folks outside their household that care about them, but definitely aren't able to enforce the same level of values and principles and precepts that a parent could. And that separation and division and the lack of family structure and family unity has had many nations in crisis for a very long time. So until we can figure out how to solve the challenges within many dysfunctional households across the world, but across our great nation, we're going to be in trouble. Because it definitely takes a village to raise a child, but that's not the proverb, actually, when you translate it. It takes a healthy village to raise a child. And I think that distinction is really important. And a village is made up of families. So in terms of what I'd like to see, I'd like to see greater emphasis on parents prioritizing their children. I just sense our children, my wife and I, have very limited screen time, very limited. Our eldest son just turned 18 last week. My youngest daughter turned 12 2 days ago. They read extensively. We have family game nights. We have family movie nights. We eat dinner. We eat breakfast together. We incorporate these values to create a sense of community within the home.
Okay,
we have a community.
Victor, you just brought something up as far as, with screen time. Now, every high school that I walk into, kids have one of these, right? They're looking at it. They're on Instagram, whatever, the social media platforms. There's a lot of, call it garbage that's out there just to maybe distract them. The youth themselves, for them to sit down and have a conversation with them is very hard for them because all their communication seems to be virtual. And I look at that as far as, it's in crisis now. And I think they say, what's going to happen 5 years from, actually not even 5, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where all the information that they've been fed is through the phone, and then the things that they see is not even reality. It's just stuff that has just been promoted to, to sell or to, influence them to buy things. It seems to me that it's going down a slope so fast, and even with the whole pandemic where a lot more people are just plugged in online more than ever, are there any solutions? I mean, you've mentioned the family and putting those things in place, but is it realistically, can we stop putting the kids having access to the phone and cutting things off? Is that realistic?
So it's definitely realistic for a whole bunch of reasons. Most of the young people that you're engaging with schools with the phones can't code in Python, can't code in HTML, don't even know what JavaScript is. So that's troublesome, because if you're using a device as a consumer, as a customer, and you have no ability to code, you're going to be a perpetual consumer or customer. The other thing that's troublesome, and I saw a young man that I actually used to do capacity building workshops for in the chats from YACE. YACE is a remarkable organization run by Devon Jones and Jamie Finch. His name's Sean Paul in the chat. Sean Paul, how are you? When you look at positive youth development, that does not require screens. That requires natural orientation. That requires the ability to have situational awareness, to have elocution skills, to be able to focus. And the premise of that focus is based off of your brain, how your brain works, how your pineal gland operates, how calcified it is, how much serotonin and melatonin are you secreting from this gland. So I'm saying all this to say, and I don't want to get too scientific around this, but the phones are harming our children. And if parents don't find ways and means to create a healthy balance around the engagement and utilization of technology to advance our children, as opposed to using technology as a way to pacify or substitute as a babysitter for our children, we're all in trouble.
Okay, wow. We have a quote here from Virginia, and she says, sometimes she feels safer with her online communities than her real life communities. Well, what do you think about that, Des?
I think like that's I think that's like an experience that many people feel, and it's very valid. I mean, for sure, like the first thing is that like the online community, it's way larger than the one that like we have in Montreal, because you're reaching from everybody. You're reaching multiple people from all across Canada who have different experience, different values, and different things that they hope for their community. I think sometimes, like in everyday life, it's like you want to connect to people who understand you and kind of understand your experiences and what you envision for yourself. I think that if it's online or if it's in real person, as long as you just get that connection to your community and it meets your need, then I think it's fine. But yeah.
I think something that I want to bring to the forefront, even with the whole organization of the youth forum we're putting together, the Unity Link Up, it provided us the opportunity to reach out to youth across the country. So things were before where I never had a discussion of a youth who's living in New Brunswick, or very limited contact with youth living in British Columbia, or speaking with some Indigenous youth who are living in Winnipeg. And one of the things that the project actually provided the opportunity is that we all had the opportunities to meet and learn from each other, talk to each other, and there's so much more that can be done. As I said, that the project itself is a pilot, and we're looking forward to doing the same thing in 2023. But I think one of the things that I want to ask you, Des, and once again too, and I'm asking the question because I don't know, because the media, we'll call it the mainstream media, would say, okay, well, Indigenous, so we're just going to clump everybody into Indigenous. But do all the Indigenous communities, does everybody get along? Like, as far as if you're based here in Quebec. Now, speaking to the issues faced by some Indigenous youth in British Columbia or in Northern Quebec or Southern Ontario, is it the same? Are the issues the same? Are they different? What would you have to say to that?
I mean, I feel like being Indigenous, there's definitely some shared experiences, pertaining to colonization. If you're youth in care, like that's also part of colonization. It's called historical oppression. And also just intergenerational trauma throughout the years. Like in any community, There's going to be some different opinions, going to be different views on things. And I think that's just very normal. But what I'm really excited about is because when I'm kind of on the media, or like when I'm looking at media and I'm seeing things on Instagram, when I'm seeing things on Facebook, and I'm seeing so much youth fighting for, like, in movements, fighting for rights to land and water and all that. Kind of like how Virginia said, like it kind of it hits something that's really, like, really close to home. And I don't know, it just kind of it really inspires me to also do the community work that I'm doing in Montreal. Just because, like, we're in different places doesn't mean that we're all different. It doesn't mean that we're all the same, because everyone's unique. But we definitely do have some lived experiences. And so, like Unity Link Up, it's good to connect the youth from all over the place, because the different social problems and the issues that we have in Canada, they're not just based in, like, in separate, like, provinces. It's a whole systematic an issue. And so being able to mobilize with people kind of across Canada is something that is really helping us like push for change.
So Victor, a youth, and for some Black youth who were maybe part of a youth organization, maybe part of student council in high school, and they want to say, you know what, we want to change things in our community. What are some of the first steps that you can give to these youth to say, you know what, before you embark on making change, what are some of the tips or they should think about?
Definitely knowledge of self, understanding who you are and what you represent and where your values lie and what integrity means to you, because that will inform how you organize, how you mobilize. I think secondly, a lot of the work is around studying, building your capacity to be clear and distinct and concise around how you communicate your message and how you actually onboard folks to your idea, your ideals, your mission, and your vision. Next, which I think is a very important piece, is thinking globally but acting locally, mobilizing, whether it be in real life or online, but ideally, if you can mobilize in real life, primarily because human connection is something that's so important. And despite our ability to connect across the waves, and I understand the concept of safety, and I definitely empathize with our colleague in the chat who spoke to feeling safer in the online community than in the physical community, because that is a challenge, and I definitely empathize. But organizing and mobilizing requires, it's relational. And building relationships solely online is very challenging for the human spirits, because this is deep work. Next, I would say actually doing some capacity building to understand if you're working on a very specific issue in your community, looking behind you. There's a principle in Buzu Sabo, or an African principle of the Sankofa, which means go back and fetch it. A lot of times young people have this belief that they are the first people to figure out some theme of oppression, which is not the case ever. There are always people that came before you that have tried to solve whatever social problem it is you're trying to solve. Looking behind and seeing what mistakes they made, what advances they made, what challenges they had, I think is really important. And then last but not least, identifying ways to check your ego and mitigating your own personal ego, because as you succeed in organizing and mobilizing, and as your work is amplified, there's going to be some extraction. People are going to try and pull on you for panels, for opportunities, and that in itself becomes a problem, because now you can almost scope or mission drift, where it becomes more about you as opposed to the actual cause that you're working on. So those are some of the just 4 simple things I would say would be basic primers or 101s around grassroots community organizing or activism work.
But here's something too. I mean, how do you deal with, and I'm not going to say, you know, every time there seems to be a movement, you're going to have, we'll call them the naysayers, right? Those could even, like, say, be part of your collective, but, you know, you're doing stuff, they call them the haters. But then also too, you have those externally who don't want to see you succeed. It could be from we call it the wider community, because if now you're starting to mobilize amongst yourselves, then they may look at you as being a threat to the bigger piece of the pie. And that's, I think, where we, the term which is, so it becomes so popular, we call it systemic racism, even though here in the province of Quebec, our premier doesn't recognize it, but certain things have been put into place that will not allow us to be successful.
Yeah, but brother, equity isn't pie. And I think that's the problem. The way we conceptualize this stuff is the issue. When you look at inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, a more inclusive, diverse space, you have a bigger plates. It's not a slice of the pie. You have a bigger table. You have better rooms, bigger rooms. You have better views. And I think through pressing individuals, and remember, systemic transformation change is incremental. So there is a certain level of patience that's required to do this work, because these systems have been baked and embedded for decades and centuries. So it's not gonna, like Thanos's ring, change overnight. But the fact remains that through that deep entrenched work of pressing and building capacity and mobilizing and organizing and making sure you have bench strength, making sure that you're not the only person in your team or in your squad or in your organization that understands this stuff and has the ability to articulate, you will be successful. It's not an if, it's a when. And there's countless narratives across history that articulate just that.
Okay. No, it's just that, the frustration comes about where I've seen, initiatives have started, and then, well, they're always going to try to find ways to throw a monkey wrench into to slow down a movement, or to disorganize a movement, we call this organized confusion. And once the confusion is there, it may slow down the movement. So, and these are things that I've seen in the past, and even movements have been intentionally infiltrated because to break down that energy, to change up the energy. If somebody has too much of a voice, they may find ways try to silence the voice, or to change the message, or to change the energy that's been put out there. And I'll just look at it. I mean, Des, you're a rapper, but I've seen where certain entertainers who had too much influence, their energy has been changed. Where if you see a rapper such as Ice Cube at one time, which was call him counterculture or whatever the case may be, diss the police and whatever the case may be, and then he became an actor who was doing family movies, but it's kind of been, he's kind of, I don't know if he's come back again, but these are some of the things that I see. They try to change your energy.
Yeah, honestly, I also see that too in kind of like the organizations and the movements that we have here in Montreal. And my own opinion is that although it's so great to have like your usual activists, your usual speakers and all that, like you said, it's only one side. And within community work, it's not just one person. You need to include everybody. And also as a person who does have that platform to share experiences and to make change and to kind of mobilize organizations to make things happen, you also need to kind of go back to what are you actually fighting for in your community? Who's at the table and who's not? And also exactly, like you got to look about whose voices are not being heard, because as a speaker, they're listening to you, but you need to make sure that the people that they aren't listening to is also in your messages that you're sending out. Like I said, it's like community work has to always go back to the community. It's not your own personal project. You always go back to the community.
Okay. No, I mean, even, terminologies. I mean, 3-4 years ago, people didn't hear about BIPOC, right? It's Black people, people of color. It's come about. Will it come and go? Will it be replaced for something else? And it just, for some people, it's just like, okay, this is just like, it's the flavor of the month, it's the flavor of the year, and it's going to be something else. For something that I would like to see, you know, I mean, I'm not into terms and labels and stuff like that, but, you know, I really want to see the people come together with a plan and stick to the plan, because sometimes we start off well, but then some people drift off, some people are not down with it, family engaged, you know, there's so many different things, and then we lose the momentum, and then sometimes we have to start back at zero. Where I see things now within the Black community and within the Indigenous community is that there's mobilization is there, but we have to keep on moving. We have to, you know, we have to keep on talking with each other. We have to develop the healthy relationships. We have to develop the healthy families, so that we're going to be able to reach our capacity, reach our full potential, and not just to say that, well, okay, you made it and that person made it. We have to make it as a group. Victor,
Yeah.
anybody want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I definitely believe that that messianic model of leadership, of having one leader and having one person at the forefront, is very problematic for any equity-seeking group. In the 60s, they were murdering people. In the 80s and 90s to the 2000s, it became character assassination. And now, like you said before, there's a bait and switch going on where folks are co-opted and movements are shifted. I think it goes back to solid governance models. So for instance, at the organization that I currently steward, I'm the executive director. I didn't want to be the executive director initially. I didn't even want to incorporate it. So I feel like we had a lot of power as a community coalition. When I took on the executive director role, I baked in a sunset clause of 5 years. I'm 2.5 years in. So that creates a dynamic where we're not going to replicate the models of the past. Because if you look at most organizations within not just the Black community and Indigenous communities, but most communities, you have executive directors of large nonprofits around for 25 to 30 years within that space. That's troublesome for a whole bunch of reasons. One, it's very hard to stay on the pulse of community at a certain age and stage in your life. And two, your socioeconomic circumstance cannot be linked to a movement, because then you can be compromised. So I think that we need to look at models of governance that make sense for the times that we're in. And we have to find ways and means, like I said before, to build our bench strength. How strong is the capacity of the constituents that you serve? Are there individuals within your network that are studying the same materials that you're studying, have the ability to articulate the mission, the vision, the mandate of the organization? How strong are the relationships? This is about network science and relationship science. How do we leverage opportunities to ensure that folks on the margins and the periphery of the economy not just get resources, but have access to opportunities and have access to knowledge? Knowledge needs to be mobilized. It can't stay in books. It can't stay on the shelves in academia. It has to be on the mouths, the tongues, and the hearts and the minds of the people. And once leaders have that model of being more in love with their community than money, we're in a better place.
Okay, but you know, I mean, something that you just mentioned, right? I mean, you know, with your mandate, a lot of good people, maybe who have great ideas and, you know, they want to get more involved into their community, they said, you know what, it's not really about, you know, they don't want to be responsible, but there's a certain fear as being accountable, right? Because now you're assuming you're in a leadership position, whether within a group, and you have to be accountable to the larger group. And a lot of people have just said, you know what, I'll just leave it alone. Or they try to, you know, they'll help some other way, you know, and, you know, I think there's this fear of people actually being accountable. Which has led to some people, some talented people, not want to be getting involved into the community at the levels that they would want to do. I mean, this is things that have been communicated to me, and also too because of certain things that have been put forward in the past. So, you know, I don't think we have to go to where we have to blow up the model, the community model, but you know, it can be also, once again, a little bit frustrating because a lot of people said, you know what, it's not for me. I got to be accountable. Other responsibilities, you know, other life issues and things like that come into play. Destiny, you just made a quote here. You said we got to go back to our community values of cooperation, respect, balance, and harmony. You cannot make it to the table and then close the door behind you. We need to share the power and the resources.
Was that me? No, I'm joking.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm joking. No. It is me. It is me. It's just because it's kind of like, you know, when we're talking about kind of like when you're kind of put on a pedestal and you're told to, okay, now speak for your community. And like I said before, like it's not just one person. The community is also your family, it's your friends, it's wherever you live with. And kind of like how we kind of put people on the forefront. Because sometimes it's like you're like just going back in my own experience, it's like sometimes I'm the only Indigenous person on a panel. I'm the only Indigenous person like on the stage when I'm performing. And it's kind of like, although, yeah, it's great to have that representation, but also it's like, I want to create opportunities for my peers in my community, my family to come on the stage with me. It's because like, exactly, it's like, as a community, it's like, it's everybody. And I don't want to just hoard the power. I don't want to hoard opportunities, because to keep the ball rolling in community work, you can't just hold on to it. You got to pass it on.
But as you say, okay, so you don't want to be the only, but do you reach out to other members of your community and say, you know what, like, this is going on, come on, you know, come with me, let's get together? Or what do they say? They don't have time, they're not interested, or like, are they, some people are a little maybe timid, you know, going outside of the community? What are some of the things that come up?
So kind of when I share some events or any like opportunities, some people are very reluctant. Well, that it's either because they have like a busy schedule, because doing community work, it's to be able to do community work, you gotta have a stable life, because it's like if you're working like 50 hours a week, you don't really have that much time to do these events, because you're just trying to survive at that point. But I try to provide ways for people to get involved that respects their own capacity. Because although it's like, yeah, it's important to be in like on like councils and all that, you can do panels, you can do presentations, but also it's like just being a good person, just respect, like using people, like saying hello to your neighbor and all that, just being a genuine good community member is enough.
Okay, people, you're listening to Destiny Gregoire, Victor Beausoleil. This is the Unity Link Up Forum. It is 2022. It is 4:30 in the afternoon. This event is put on by the U Stars Foundation, supported by RBC and supported by Canadian Heritage. If you have any questions right now, you could pose your questions in the chat as we're winding down. I'm going to ask both of you, what is on your wish list for Victor for the Black community and Destiny for the Indigenous community? What would be on your wish list if you could say, wake up tomorrow and there could be certain changes that would take place? What would be on your wish list?
My first thing on my wish list is to make sure that like every Indigenous youth or person, community member feels like that they have a voice, but also it's that just knowing that they matter, and that knowing that like the community work is for them. You don't have to like, and just accepting them for who they are, because a lot of the time we want to give support to the people who are looking nice, the people who are in school and all that, but literally it's like we're not just doing this for the people who are like trailblazers. We're doing it because you matter. And honestly, just giving the mic to the youth. I would love to say that more.
Okay. Thank you, Shafan, for that quote. When is this happening again? Hopefully sooner than later. Thank you very much. You'd like to join. Victor, what would be on your wish list?
Definitely a deeper reference for Sasiya, or Mother Earth. I feel we exploit her, we extract from her, we breathe her air, we taint her soil, we walk on her every day, and we have no reference. We don't bow to her, we don't respect her at all. So if I could flick a switch and have peoples of African descent, or just peoples globally, have a deeper respect for Mother Earth, I think that'd be remarkable. As well, great reverence, acknowledgement for our ancestors. I believe that many of our ancestors are rolling in their graves if they could see what's going on TikTok or Instagram, or they fought, bled, and died. My ancestors are at the bottom of the transatlantic, maybe about a kilometer away from where I am right now. I'm in Cape Coast, right near the dungeons, right where my ancestors were taken to the West. And when you look at the plights and the ignorance and apathy, I don't know, I don't care, of peoples of African descent globally, in some instances, not all, but in some, it's a great disrespect to the calamity and the great tragedy that happened to our ancestors. And there isn't venerance and acknowledgements of what they stood for and what they fought for. And last but not least, I would love to see greater solidarity amongst brothers and sisters, and just that acknowledgement that we're brothers and sisters and we need to treat each other as such, and find ways and means to work past any challenges we have, any issues, and recognize the abundance that's ever present. So those would be the three wishes that I would deploy if I had the ability.
Okay. People.
So well said, Victor. I agree.
Well, I mean, here's something. I mean, as I said, it's one of the objectives that we have or had for the Unity Link Up was to start to have some communications or discussions with the Black community and the Indigenous community. And that's actually going to be on the forefront for 2023. What can we do to bring the Black community and our Indigenous brothers and sisters together for community, economic, social, cultural development? What would be the best way to do something like that? I mean, I think everything starts with a discussion. A hello, hi, let's talk. You know, what are your concerns? What are our concerns? But what could we do to make that happen? I'll start with you, Des.
So like you said, like there definitely needs to be a place for discussion, to have like these conversations, to share those experiences and what it means. Also, it's like I also want to have see more opportunities, so I can learn more about the Black community, and then we can kind of just share information, we can share values, and we can kind of come up with like a goal for ourselves. But honestly, I think it has to do with kind of like building a relationship. I think that's kind of exactly with community. It's very relational. It's building a relationship where there's understanding, there's respect, and there's and it's healthy. So also just finding common ground. So historically, how are we similar? What kind of shared experiences do we have? But also honoring that we're two different communities with our own problems, but we still come together to support each other. So just creating a space to have that, and also to connect people.
Victor.
Yeah, I believe that there's so much commonality. When you look at the remarkable work my sister Larissa Crawford at Future Ancestors has been facilitating for quite some time, and so many of my brother Shadi Hafez at NAFC and Jocelyn Forsmore, or my sister Sarah McNeil at NACA, or there's so much commonality amongst Indigenous leaders and African Canadian leaders that there should be greater solidarity. And I know that at the organization I currently steward, we've built some remarkable relationships with leaders, and we're consistently trying to find ways and means to create models of solidarity and convene folks. And that's part of my work. I'm really excited to even to be able to build with our remarkable colleague Destiny, which is a providence. You know, I feel it's our destiny, literally, to work together. as peoples that have historically been excluded and traditionally been marginalized in so many ways. So the work continues, but like I said before, it's incremental and requires patience, intentionality, and purposeful conversations.
Thank you, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap this up. This has been a very, very interesting, dynamic discussion. This is the Unity Link Up Forum. Before I wrap up and close up, I would like to thank all of the youth ambassadors, the 10 of you who participated. We started off with discussions. Going to thank you, Des, thanking Hillary, thanking Samat, thanking Osani, Hillary, Harvin, Elijah, Rare, Alexandra in Vancouver, all of you who contributed to putting on this event together. I want to thank Malik Shahid. I want to thank Paz, who's here in the studio here, Victoria. Want to thank RBC. Want to thank all Canadian Heritage, all of the other panelists who were involved. Anybody who contributed to put on this event. As I said, we had initially wanted to do this face-to-face, but through the situation with COVID, we did it virtually. But we are looking to do this next year. We are going to do this next year, 2023, and we are going to find ways, we're going to keep the discussions going to bring our Black brothers and sisters and our Indigenous brothers and sisters together for discussion, for development. We can do this virtually, as I said, face-to-face is always nice, but we are going to keep the discussion going. So, and I want to thank everybody too who logged in for these past 2 weekends on Zoom, or if you're watching on the Facebook Live. Just, you know, if you missed anything, you can go back on the Facebook and look at the videos. They're all recorded. We are going to be actually putting out edited versions of the video too for people that could look at. And if you're a teacher, an educator, if you're a youth, you're a parent, a youth worker, you know, if there's anything that you could take from these discussions to share with your youth, please do so. We are not here to hide information. We're here to share information, to disseminate information that you could use and share with others. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, my name is Brian Smith. It's been an honor to be speaking with you for these past 2 weekends. And I just want everybody, as I said, you know, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Stay safe. I want to thank our 2 panelists here, Victor Beausoleil. Thank you very much for chiming in. You're across the waters, but we're able to connect and speak online. Destiny, thank you very much. You're here in Quebec, so you know we got to go out and shovel some snow later on. It's just where we are. But thank you very much. As I said, it's with pride and great emotion. As I said, when we can bring people together, we could bring resources together, we can make magic happen, not just for the present, but for the future. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brian Smith, representing the Youth Stars Foundation. And have a great night. And as I go back and share the word, unity is the key. One love.